My closest group of friends had a parallel chat without me where they had been criticizing my life decisions for months. I found out from a screenshot that came to me by mistake. What I did with that information changed what I thought was my support network. There are images that arrive on your phone, and that when you open them, the brain takes a second to process what it is seeing. Not because they are technically difficult to understand, but because what they mean requires a moment to settle. The screenshot arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Andrea sent it to me with a message that said, "Did you see what she said yesterday?" There was no additional context. I opened the image. It was a screenshot of a WhatsApp chat. The group name was the usual ones, no drama. I recognized all the participants' names. They were my 4 closest friends. I was not in that group. And the message Andrea had captured and sent me, thinking she was sending it to someone else, was a message from one of the other girls commenting on something I had told that friend group the week before about a work decision I was considering. The comment was not kind. "My name is Sophia. I am 36 years old. I am an events photographer, and I have spent 8 years with a group of 5 friends we had built during a period of shared work, and that had become what I would have described until that Thursday as my most solid support network. The 5 of us were me, Andrea, Valeria, Marcella, and Lucia. 8 years of birthdays celebrated together, of crises accompanied, of trips, of the early morning conversations that friends who truly know each other have. Or so I thought. The chat, the usual ones, no drama, was a chat that existed without me. From a history I could see in the screenshot that came to me by mistake, it had been active for at least 6 months. 6 months. I replied to Andrea with a message that said, "I think you sent this to me by mistake." The 3 minutes it took her to respond were the 3 longest minutes of that Thursday. When she responded, she told me, "Oh God, Sophia, I'm so sorry. I swear it was meant for Valeria." I told her not to worry about it. I closed the conversation with Andrea, and I stayed with the phone in my hand and the image still open. What I did in the next 20 minutes is what I think anyone in that situation does, even if they know they perhaps should not. I asked Andrea to send me more. Not with those exact words. With a message, "Can you tell me how extensive that chat is?" Andrea took a while to respond. When she responded, she told me she was so sorry, that she was not going to send me more because it was not fair to the others, that what had happened had been an accident, and she did not want it to become bigger than it was. I told her I understood, but the fact that Andrea said she did not want it to become bigger told me there was something to become bigger. I did not look for more information that day. What I did was reread the screenshot I had. The capture message was from Marcella. It said something about my work decision in a tone that combined pity and condescension in a way I recognized, because it was the tone Marcella sometimes used when talking about people who were not present. I had not thought she would use it with me. Below Marcella's message, there was a response from Valeria that was partially visible. It started with, "It's just that Sophia always," and the rest was cut off. It's just that Sophia always. 8 years of friendship condensed into a phrase that started that way. I did not sleep well that night. What I processed in the hours I did not sleep had several layers. The first was the most immediate, what the chat meant. 5 people who got together without me to talk about me, who took what I told them in the main group, the things I told them because I consider them my trust network, and processed it in a parallel space where I had no voice. The second was broader. 8 years. Everything I had shared. The number of things I had told in that friendship, believing the space was safe. The number of times I had been the topic of conversation in a chat where I was not present. The third was more practical. What I did now. I decided not to react impulsively, not to confront by message, not to explode in the main group, not to call any of them that night. I decided to wait until the weekend to have the conversation that corresponded and have it the right way. Those 2 days of waiting were difficult. I kept seeing the messages in the main group where everything continued normally. Valeria sent a meme. Marcella asked whether anyone wanted to get together Saturday. Andrea was quiet. I responded normally because I still did not know exactly what I wanted to do, and because reacting from anger was not going to give me the conversation I needed. On Saturday, I sent a message to the main group. I told them I needed the 5 of us to meet that day, that it was important. Valeria asked whether I was okay. I told her yes, but that I needed to see them in person. We agreed on a cafe at 4 in the afternoon. I arrived with a screenshot saved on my phone. All four were there when I arrived. Andrea looked at me with the expression of someone who knows exactly what this is going to be about. The other three had the energy of people who do not know what to expect. I sat down. I ordered a coffee. And when the coffee arrived, I took out my phone and placed a screenshot in the center of the table. The silence that followed lasted several seconds. Marcella was the first to speak. She told me she could explain. I told her yes, please explain. What Marcella said was what I expected in one sense and did not expect in another. She told me the chat had started a few months ago when she and Valeria had been talking about a situation of mine and had wanted to have a space to process it without bringing me into the conversation because they did not want to worry me. I asked about what situation. She told me about the situation with my partner. She told me they had been noticing things for months that worried them and had been talking among themselves because they did not know how to tell me. I asked why they had not told me directly. There was a silence. Valeria said it was difficult. I asked whether it was easier to have a separate chat to process it without me. Nobody answered. I told the four of them I had questions and that I wanted them to answer honestly. First, how long had that chat existed? Marcella said about 6 months. Second, did they only talk about the situation with my partner or about other things too? Silence. Valeria said sometimes they talked about other things. I asked what other things. She told me sometimes when I shared something in the main group, they would comment on it among themselves. I asked whether they commented on what I shared in a way I would want to hear or in the way I had seen in the screenshot. Nobody answered. The answer was in the silence. I told the four of them what I felt, not with the drama of someone who wants to produce an effect, with the clarity of someone who has had 48 hours to process something and who has the words ordered. I told them that what they had built was a space where what I shared with them as my trust network became conversation material in a place where I had no voice. That was not concern for me. That if it had been concern, they would have found a way to tell me what they thought directly. That what it actually was more comfortable for them. That they could process what they thought about my decisions without having to assume the consequences of telling me what they thought. That I had believed for 8 years that the space between us was safe. The screenshot sent by mistake had told me that space was more complicated than I thought. Andrea was the only one who said something different from the rest. She told me she had not been comfortable with the chat from the beginning, that she had participated little, that when she had sent me the screenshot by mistake, it had been a real accident, but that somewhere there had also been something in her that had wanted me to know. I thank her for saying that, not because it made everything that had happened right, but because it was the most honest thing anyone had said at that table since I had arrived. I ended the conversation telling them I needed time, that I was not making any decision about the friendship at that moment, that what I had discovered required me to process not only the chat, but what it meant about 8 years of a relationship in which I had placed trust that I now saw with different eyes, that when I had something clearer, I would let them know, that for now what I needed was space. I left the cafe without waiting for a response. For months have passed. The dynamic with each of the four is different. With Andrea, I talked individually 2 weeks later. It was the most honest conversation we have had in 8 years. She told me things about the group that I did not know and that changed things I had understood a certain way. I'm not going to recount them here because they belong to that conversation and to her. But after that conversation, the relationship with Andrea exists in a different and more real way than the one we had before. With Marcella and Valeria, the process has been slower. There have been conversations. There have been moments where what they said corresponded with what they had done and moments where it did not. The process continues. With Lucia, who had participated less in the chat according to what Andrea told me, the relationship remains more similar to what it was, though, with the new awareness that group dynamics produce things that each individual person may not have consciously chosen. The main group exists but functions differently, less confessional on my part, more conscious. With the information that the space was not what I thought it was does not mean it has to disappear. It means I have to relate to it knowing what I now know. What I want you to take from this story has parts for different people. For those who recognize themselves in my position, discovering that a group of people you trusted had a parallel space where they processed your life without you is a specific loss. It is not the same loss as a direct betrayal. It is the loss of the certainty that the space you thought was safe was safe. and processing that requires separating the layers. What each person did individually, what the group dynamic produced, and what you need from each relationship going forward. Those three things do not have the same answer. For those who recognize themselves in the chat group's position, parallel chats where someone who is not present is processed almost always start with an intention that feels reasonable. Concern. Need a process. Not wanting to hurt the person with what you think. And they become something different over time. A space where the comfort of not having to tell someone what you think of their decisions disguises itself as consideration for that person, when it is actually consideration for yourselves. The difference between being concerned about someone and talking about that person with people who know them without telling them is the difference between support and analysis. Support goes toward the person. Analysis goes toward yourselves. If this story resonated with you, comment. Have you ever discovered that people close to you were having conversations about you in spaces where you were not present? Like if you believe parallel chats and friend groups are more common than is talked about and deserve to be named. Subscribe for more real stories. Share with someone who might be in a similar dynamic and who needs a language to process it. Reflection to take with you. The trust you place in a group of people is not automatically the trust each individual person in the group deserves. And what a group produces as a collective dynamic is not necessarily what each person would choose alone. Separating those things when something goes wrong is what allows you to make more precise decisions about what to keep and what to let go.